Today we took our group in Mexico City to the Aztec temple, which you see the ruins of here, and I gave them a 15-minute talk about the meaning of this place, and here's what it looked like back then. It was a massive temple, and it was a beautiful city, but the human sacrifice there just bloodied everything. Here's what the people look like, the Aztec Indians, and I want to talk to you a little bit about them and what happened in this place and how it relates to the Catholic faith. But first, Roberto is going to explain a little history.
What used to be the main temple of the Aztecs, the main pyramid. In this case, this pyramid was as high as the Sun Pyramid, with more than 64 meters high, but its base was shorter, like the base of the Moon Pyramid. So it means that it was more steep. On the top, there were two temples in this place. The temple of the god of war and the temple of the god of rain. The main deities that these people used to worship. And it was the center of operations of the Aztec Empire. It was based on the bloody ceremonies they celebrated here. Just next to it, we have two little temples, and then the temple of the eagles. You can even see the sculptures of eagles over there. And behind, the area where the warriors used to celebrate their ceremonies before going to war.
I think it is a lot of application to us today. Can you hear me all right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a huge number of humans sacrificed here. In fact, when they dedicated this temple, the Aztecs themselves had written that they offered 80,600 human sacrifices in 4 days to dedicate the temple. Now, historians say that that's probably exaggerated, maybe 2,000 or 3,000, but still, they would sacrifice them, and I have pictures, and I'll show you on my iPhone that I collected on this, but they would actually bring people here and they would bring them alive. A lot of times it would be the captives that they would capture in their battles. That's one of the reasons they had wars, is to go out and get living sacrifices to bring back here. And they found here a bunch of flint knives. And what they would do is they would hold them down, and I've got pictures that the Aztecs themselves drew of their sacrifices, and they would hold them down and they would cut their chest open and rip their heart out while it's still beating and they're still alive, and hold it up to the gods. And offered, because they believed that the blood is what fed the gods, and they needed human blood because the gods had at one time come down and made sacrifices for humans, and now the humans had to in turn make the blood sacrifices to the gods to thank them and to do this. And a huge scale, massive scale of humans that were killed here. They take them up to the top, and there was so many that they said that the blood was rolling down the steps like water coming down the steps when they rolled and then they would eat these people too. They were cannibalistic. They ate. There's pictures of them eating their legs and things. What's interesting about this, and why it ties in with Christianity, and why it's significant that the basilica and the cathedral is right there, is because they said that these people that they used to sacrifices, many of them, they would dress them up to look like their gods, so that they would have the face of God. And that they said, even I have a book on the Aztecs that said that they would say that these people that they were sacrificing were in the image of God, so that God would accept them, and they would dress them up like the gods, so that when they killed them, it was like God himself tie that in with Christ. God took on the face of a man. Man had the face of God. It says in Colossians that he became the visible image of the invisible God. Exactly the same words the Aztecs used. And they felt that they had to make these human sacrifices on a daily basis to keep the gods happy. But what happens when Jesus comes down? He is the sacrifice. So one of the ways, and I learned this first from you, Roberto, and then I looked it up too, is that these people, they believed that they had to make the human sacrifice on a daily basis to keep the gods happy. So when the missionaries came, they said, wait a minute, the real face of God also was a man, but it was Jesus Christ, and he was eternal. So there needed to be a sacrifice. But you don't need to kill finite, limited human beings day after day, because that doesn't do anything. The one eternal human, he was God but became human, came down and made one eternal sacrifice in his body with the face of God, in the image of God. He made the one eternal sacrifice, so you don't have to kill people every day, because there was already one man who was killed for you to please the gods or God, and it was Jesus Christ. Well, they could understand that. See, and all of a sudden now we don't have to kill Deacon. We don't have to kill Ted. We can now accept that one sacrifice. So why build this basilica right next to here? Because that is where that sacrifice is available every day, the body and blood. You don't have to eat the legs of your sacrificial victims here and drink their blood, which is what they did as cannibals. They would eat their body parts and eat these things. They're eating the flesh and they're drinking the blood, but over there they say, no, now this one eternal human who died in our place, who satisfied God, you can now partake of that same sacrifice every day, not here by eating people's legs and their hearts, but you can go here and you can have the body and blood of Jesus every day. That same eternal sacrifice comes down for you every day. I just found that very, very intriguing, and that was one of the methods used to convert the Indians when they realized that God had already taken on the face of man, and man had the face of God, and he had already made the sacrifice, and now we can partake of it every day over there. So look at the two sacrifices, body and blood, human sacrifice. Over here it's also a human gave his life. Please the gods, please the God. They had something right. They were onto something. They just didn't understand it all, and they pursued it in a way that was without the revelation. We are lucky we had the revelation from God. The Spaniards came and they revealed that revelation to these Indians, and now they could say, hey, what we were doing, we were on the right track, just doing it very wrongly. And how much good for us, because we have the same sacrifice and we eat the body and blood every day. Thanks to Father, we did that this morning. We partook of the sacrifice. And Paul, even back in Paul's times, they made sacrifices. There were human sacrifices and things being made. Paul says in Romans chapter 12, verse 1, I beg of you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your rational service. The word rational, some Bibles translate it spiritual, but it really is the rational soul. It's a rational thing that you're doing. So he's begging you. These people gave sacrifices of their bodies. In fact, some of these people offered to be sacrificed because they believed that they would somehow have union with God if they would sacrifice. Paul says, I beg you to give yourselves, your bodies, as living sacrifices to God, which is your reasonable service of worship. So in a sense, we would also go here and say we want to offer ourselves to be cut open, and because it's also the right impulse, just done the wrong way. Paul shows us how to take that impulse and do it rightly in the church with the body and blood. We also then give ourselves as living sacrifices to God, and we become his servants, and he accepts our sacrifice, which is the reasonable service that we're supposed to do. Isn't that fascinating? I couldn't wait to get here and share that with you. The parallels, the contrasts, the human inclination for sacrifice. When we became Catholics, I'll just quit with this, but when we became Catholics, the first thing that started our whole journey into the Catholic Church was Janet coming home from the Baptist church one day, and we were driving home. She said, I can't go there anymore and call that worship, because he preached, but it wasn't worship. And we realized that worship always involves sacrifice. Nobody, no human beings ever came to the god or gods, whatever they perceive them to be, without an offering or a sacrifice. And these people very much, no civilization has ever had the human sacrifice to the magnitude that this one did. The Aztecs, they took it to the heights of 80,000 people in 4 days, according to their records. But nobody came to the god or gods without a sacrifice. And we realized that in our Baptist church, there was no sacrifice. But when we came to the Catholic Church, yes, there's still the body and blood, the fulfillment of what these folks are thinking of. And that's why we're Catholics. I'm glad we're no longer Aztecs. Population densities had more likelihood to have human sacrifices. I read some studies on that. And these people were 500 people per square mile, if I remember right. And that really expanded almost the sociological need, but they would practice they didn't see it that way. They would just, it was like human beings were so plentiful that we could afford to sacrifice them. So human beings, for their own good, their own relationship to the gods, for fertility, for the rains, because this was the temple to the rain. So you sacrifice and the rain god then gives you rain. They're willing to sacrifice their infants and their human beings in order to get these benefits to themselves. How much does that tie in with abortion in our country, where Americans now don't think that we're not sacrificing infants? When you have what Obama and Hillary wanted to do, and thank God we're not letting them get the chance anymore, is partial birth abortion, where you can actually rip the baby out, take the head, poke the scissors into his head, suck the brains out, and then pull the baby out dead, throw that baby alive. Don't tell me that's not a human you don't know that, what we do in America. People don't realize that, Priscilla, but that's called partial birth abortion, and both Obama and Hillary said right up to the moment of birth, when the baby's head comes out, you can cut the baby's head open, suck the brains out, and throw the baby away. It's called partial birth abortion, and they want that available for all women in the United States. You don't tell me that that's not human sacrifice. You just sacrificed a human being. Why? For the well-being, maybe the prosperity of that girl, or maybe just because she doesn't want to admit she made a mistake and be responsible for her choices. That's human sacrifice. And we look at these, and I could bring a whole group of secular Americans here, and they'd be aghast that people were offering humans here as sacrifices, and then turn it right back around and say, and now do you think it's any different than what we're doing in our country, where we're offering infants for the pleasure or for the well-being of a girl who doesn't want to have that baby? They're willing to rip that baby out and kill it. They kill it just like this. There's blood also when that happens. So I see, how long can God continue to bless a country that promotes the slaughter of infants, infant sacrifice? I'm going to call it that from now on. I'm not even going to call it abortion. I'm going to call it infant sacrifice. We're sacrificing infants. Human sacrifice. It's horrible. And we think we're so much more civilized than these people, but are we really? Are we really? So God bless America, because we really need it, and I hope the change at the Aztec temple, where they offered human beings as sacrifices and they ate the bodies. It was eating of the body and blood of the human sacrifices. But here we have the cathedral right next door, built here I think on purpose, so that we have over here we also eat the body and blood, and also it's to appease the gods. But here it's very different, and this is the way the Indians were taught, because they were taught that there was a sacrifice over here of eating the body and blood of the god, and they don't have to do it over here, eating the body and blood and sacrificing those who have the face of God.